My name is John Kelly. I work with JISC. I'm going to talk a little bit about sector-specific guidance on the regulations that's underway and will hopefully be available to you soon. Um, Thanks to Richard Morton. I didn't get to hear his talk, but I do appreciate the support that he's providing and helping us all towards compliance. This, of course, is the legislation. It's in fairly plain English and it's relatively easy to read and understand, and it comes with the explanatory memorandum and provides some, which that also provides some explanation. And as I said, we also have a lot of GDPR guidance, which is very helpful. The regulations have come about following consultation agreement on the EU directive and are enforced now since September last year. And Richard has, I believe, gone over the various deadlines that we're required to meet. So you would think that it would be fairly easy to settle on and agree what the legislation says and what we need to do. However, there was fairly widespread concern on email lists and elsewhere that the regulations, but they weren't an easy fit for some of the online activities of universities and colleges and how websites are used, how we use websites. And there was some lack of clarity as to how the rules might apply. And indeed, certain phrases in the legislation, how phrases in the legislation will be interpreted or are interpreted has an impact on the likely amount of work and investment an institution will have. We have distinct requirements because of the diverse range, as I said, of websites and intranets, and the sort of closed, with those sort of closed, secure online learning environments, for example, that exist. But working with others in the sector, I compiled 10 question areas that are being put to a law firm to give us their opinions and interpretation on. We then build this guide. We will then build guidance around these opinions and these questions. The question areas are listed here, and they're in no particular order. And I'm just going to go step quickly through them just to give you an indication of what our thinking is at the moment. The first one is about scope, and it seems very basic and straightforward now, but up until very recently, there had been murmurings that these regulations don't apply to us or to some institutions. And the question we've put is that are FE and HE institutions able to claim that their websites for any part of their activities, whether that's education or non-education or commercial, are accepted from the effect of the regulations because of the way that it's phrased, say, in Regulation 4, and which refers to non-governmental organizations. I know Richard has covered which organizations that the regulations impact on and which organizations are exempt, and that's great to hear that. I very much appreciate having an authority for universities and colleges being within the scope of the regulations. And this guidance, with this guidance, hopefully we can nail that down. Question 2 is about websites. Although the regulations apply to a website, the term website itself is not defined in the regulation. So some obvious things that come up are what kind of digital estate are in scope. Do the regulations apply to applications running in browsers? Does the term website cover systems, all systems delivered through browsers, such as HR systems, library systems, accommodation systems, etc.? We want to clarify that as much as we can. Question 3 is about commercial activities. Many universities have commercial activities, car parking, cafes, business support, other stuff that don't necessarily count as public sector activities. And so are the digital services of these entities covered by the regulations? Is a consumer of these services able to use the regulations to require that the website delivery of these entities meet accessibility standards? And again, that's one area we'd like to clarify as well. And question 4 is about disproportionate burden. This exception is an important one, and we've heard also about the process for claiming the exception. We want our guidance to have examples of where to be reasonable to apply the exception and examples of where it would not be reasonable. Science, technology, engineering and math subjects, others such as visual and performance arts, and they're quite challenging to make fully accessible and are much more difficult to do so than text-based subjects. So we need to know what's good practice here and how that is handled. And the other question that has come up is that if a disproportionate burden claim is being put forward, do they have to? Is it necessary to create a written disproportionate burden assessment, and what would a good example or template of that look like? But again, we're going to address that in the guidance and in the support that we're providing. How is it best approached? Well, although I know Richard has addressed some of this already, and that's quite helpful, very helpful. Substantial revision is a phrase that's used in the regulations, and we've asked for some clarity and interpretation of this. For example, at what point, or is there a point at which small changes, such as adding new documents, can be said to add up to or aggregate to a substantial change to the website, and how that's applied, I suppose, or how we should approach that? How is that gauged? We want to be able to provide clarity here as well. In question 6, we're looking at the phrase which is used in the legislation, active administrative processes. We need to look at that practically and ask, does all content that students are required to engage with as part of their course count as content that is needed for active administrative processing? Now, there's a bit of a stretch there. That needs to be clarified. Accessibility statement is question 7 area. There was demand for more guidance on clarity on accessibility statements. Does every digital platform that's significantly different from its neighbour need a separate statement? Also, how will the rules be applied to the VLE side of things, for example? We want to make sure we can provide good practice guidance in that area, which is quite specific to the way colleges and universities use websites and use VLE. Question 8, procurement, is also an important one. So, to what extent does an institution need to ensure that when procuring web-based systems and platforms and applications, that these meet the required accessibility standard? I mean, we've got to settle on a way of dealing with this in terms of procurement. There is an issue also about other third-party hosted content and accessed by learners, what the obligations are, and clarifying for institutions what their obligations are with that type of content. The phrase that's used in the legislation is third-party content that's neither funded nor developed by nor under the control of the public sector body that is an exempt. That is exempt, so that's an exemption. So, but we'd like to settle on what is good practice here for an institution. Question 9 concerns captioning and transcription of videos and learning resources. In this day and age, automatic speech recognition tools are available for institutions to improve the accessibility of learning resources, recorded learning resources, for example. And in practice, these tools have variable success rates. And the question then that has been put to us is, are partially accurate transcript and captioning sufficient to meet the accessibility requirement with regard to videos? And again, we want to settle down on what the regulations say, what good practice would be, and what we should be doing with that. Question 10 is one I came up with, I think, is, and it's really what's to prevent an institution just removing difficult or resources they would categorize as difficult altogether, rather than making them accessible. So just deciding to say, well, actually, we're just going to stop publishing that, rather than making it accessible? Is there anything to prevent an institution actually doing that, and how that would be regarded from a legal point of view? All right, that's a quick run through those. That's underway, and as I said, it's going to take a little bit of time before it's available to you, but I think hopefully it'll be useful. And we just wants to build and publish good practice guidance around these question areas, and we're always looking for best ways to continue to surface and showcase good accessibility practice and support universities and colleges in that way. As well as being involved in awareness raising about the legislation, JISC has been hosting and supporting the very active and well-received accessibility drop-in clinic, which are on the first Wednesday of each month. It's a bit of a free-for-all, really, where you can bring along your concerns and ask how others in the sector are dealing with the same issue. And these drop-in clinics will continue for the foreseeable future. Also, the JISC mail list carries on being a great forum for surfacing issues and for staff members to get out there to share concerns about and the approaches to implementation of the regulations. It's another safe environment where we can learn and work with each other. The other thing I'd say is that there's still time to add to the guidance, but please do send me questions and queries to the email address there. I think it's on screen, hopefully. john.kelly@disc.ac.uk, and I'll try to make sure that these questions and your input will contribute to the guidance being prepared.
So you're talking there, John, about the legal guidance that you're seeking.
Say that again, sorry.
Sorry, you're asking there for people to come forward if they've got additional questions or suggestions for the legal guidance that you're trying to get.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
That's correct. There's still time to add to the guidance. If you have questions or issues which you still find puzzling and which you think would be helpful in getting views on from a law firm, then please do send them to me, and I'll do my best to make sure that these are added to the guidance being prepared.
Thank you very much, John. Can I take some questions from the room and then?
Sure.
So, if anybody would like to ask a question into the ether for John. Yeah.
The obvious question is, when will the guidance be available, I suppose? Is that all right?
I was thinking about asking that. I'd happily get the answer. It was actually slightly different initially. On the idea of the disproportionate burden, you mentioned some sort of qualitative things that may be difficult to make accessible. Is there any sense that there may be a quantitative element as well, that we have too large a set of content to approach economically?
Well, I think yes is the short answer. I think Richard has outlined the process that you've got to go through. So you've got to be able to first of all, where you know that this is you're going to claim disproportionate burden, then you're going to have to justify that. Now, there is a range of issues and a list of stuff in the legislation which describes what you need to do. So I think that's the approach, and I think quantity has to be in effect. It has to be also proportionate to the size of the organisation. So if you're a large, heavily resourced institution, then it's going to be harder to claim that a large quantity is going to be more of a problem. If you're a smaller institution, then that is more likely to be arguable. But again, I don't want to answer that now, but I think that will be part of the guidance that we're going to provide.
Thanks very much, John. I think we're going to have to stop at that point because I think we need to move on to the next person, otherwise we're going to be crashing into lunch. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Nice to speak to you, Fiona. I'll be in touch.